You muted, Nick.
Thank you. Oh Shiva, when we are faced with thievery, aggression, and deception, please come quickly. When we wear good clothes and eat good food and keep a clean house for you, may the Dralas be our armor. Please come quickly, right now, and dispel the radiance of aggression, traps, and concepts of walls, ceilings, and floors. This juniper offering rises to the happy country of La as our ancestors have done and brings down the blessings of the land Dralas, the house Dralas, and the garden Dralas on this dwelling. Kiki, so. Yo, the suchness of penetrating primordial insight arises as the all-pervading essence of everything. You, the mother, the great consort Ekajati, creator of samsara and nirvana, please arise from space. Samaya Jabyobi. Our practice is an offering to you, single eye of wisdom. Please help us to see that everything that happens, good or bad, is you trying to wake us up. Samaya ho. Om Mama Ruru Hum Rita Rakum Te Pusha Hodamara to Eva. Ka ka From the primordial Jala is the essence of the stars and on the tip of each hair, to the mother Jalas that make the trees grow, to the father Jalas, the rustling of the wind through the branches and leaves, to our mother ancestors, the history and lineage of our family, to the father ancestors, the history and lineage, to the personal Jala, guide us, support us, and help us bring out our unique mission in this life. Cast away obstacles to help us manifest our full potential. Set the boundaries of protection all around us so we may cherish and enjoy and deepen insight in the precious Dharma. Maho. It's really good fortune to be able to have each other to explore the teachings, and it's very, very auspicious that these teachings want to be practiced and received by us and for us. And there are others, but who have received the transmissions and do these practices, but not very many. And we are the most dedicated group right here, at least of those who could come to these kind of things. Maybe there's one or two other people. It's not a huge thing. It's very intimate. Um, I'm constantly, I mean, as you know, you've been there with me through it, but over these last few years, I'm constantly amazed at how these teachings are revealed to me, through me, educate me, are what I've learned, are some of it, is a synthesis that I've made. And then there's aspects of it that are just pop out like, no, no, look at this. Or no, no, do this. And it's like, right. Um, so anyway, I love that, and I love you, and I love what we're doing. And yeah, there's something in this about, I was gonna say like small but mighty, our sangha. But the other side of it is like, I've really been, what a journey I've gone through in the last few years to go from um, viewing, the expansion of Shambhala Dharma around the globe and traveling and all these things, to like realizing that what's really while that's all beautiful and fine, and sure, there's nothing wrong with any of that, but what's really important is the quality of and sincerity of the sangha and the practices and the that we do together. And then I see so many examples of that throughout history, in Buddhism especially, of just like, it's not about, like, it's not about moving units. It's not about that. It never has been. Not in, it's never sincerely been that way. It never has been. And there are times where there's more expansiveness and less. And I think everyone's always felt like that in Dharma. Though my friend Loden has told me that Atisha was always sort of saying, "Hey, look, this is the dark age. It's at this time there's not really a lot you can do. So just here's some teachings on Lojong, and good luck. But we're in the decline now." And we're all like, "Wait, Atisha thought that? That was a long time ago." So I don't know. I think it's there's some kind of tradition of that, but also just like the rarity of people sincerely like practicing, and that as a social phenomenon you could get a lot more mileage. People will show up and do things, but when that social container falls apart, it's a real mirror of like who's really fortunate enough to keep going. And I mean that with great sadness as much as appreciation. It's like, yeah, you could think there were all these people involved, but really, it's never in history. It's always been kind of like it's so much easier for people to get involved in something when it has this big thingamajig, and then when it's actually just very direct and humble, and there's no credential and no nothing in it for you other than your own uh, path, then it's different, right? It's very intimate, very personal. So anyway, I've come full circle to think like, wow, I see us as a tremendous success of, just this is what Dharma really looks like. Not doesn't have to look just like this, or it could look like big groups, small groups, but it's the quality that you see what I mean. That's really how I'm going. Oh wow, I've really that's a big shift for me from. I mean, I always cared about the quality, of course, but when you're in a community that's a larger thing, you kind of, yeah, it's part of the culture you're in. It's fascinating to see that shift and watch what I've had to let go of or unlearn or relearn or emphasize and de-emphasize, and just it's been an incredible mirror, as the phenomenal world as teacher always is, right? And speaking of that, perhaps each of us could check in a little bit. How is the phenomenal world teacher treating us in these, or whatever is going on for you that you find interesting or you'd like to share at this time, and then we'll go from there.
I've just been experiencing a lot more just sense of gratitude and bliss and um, contentment, satisfaction, and yet still very aware of all different kinds of feelings going through. Going through things, and I was part of a group called Witness for Peace in Nicaragua, and it was war, and I knew people who were killed, and it was interesting how it brought me down, and I didn't think to practice then. There was a part of me, it was like, no, I want to feel this. Um, and yet it did kind of bring me down. And again, I didn't think to practice. And yet today, when I was just feeling so blissful and grateful, and life was really going well, even though there was a lot of heaviness in terms of clients, etc. I got disappointed by a insurance estimate, and I was really disappointed. And I realized, oh, I do want to be with this, and I can use the practice. Today I was able to, and understandably, it wasn't quite as heavy as yesterday. But I loved that I was able to use the practice and feel that uplifting of energy, and yet be with the disappointment, be with, it it didn't stop that sense of the disappointment, but it just didn't, it was beginning to sort of pull me down. And then when I remembered the practice and did this, it didn't. It just felt like my heart was open to that experience. And there was one other thing, and it was a question I had. Maybe it was one with this. I don't actually remember, but I remembered, doing some of the bliss practice and feeling more uplifted, and felt that sense of bliss. And yet it kind of faded, and I just did the practice again, and then I was able to hold whatever it was. And I don't remember if that was with the insurance thing or not, but it was just really interesting just practicing with all that. And I just really appreciated, I know you had brought this up because in one of your talks, that like it's not denying or pushing away life, and I can't remember exactly how you expressed it, but it's more like using that, as a way to be with and allow, whether it's, radiating out compassion to other people or to yourself, or, just whatever is going on. So it was interesting just feeling the differences and when I remembered and when I didn't. Just want to say one more thing, because I'm remembering that it wasn't just about disappointment. It tapped into old stories of being alone, no one having my back, not really having a sense of support, starting to eclipse into that. And that's when I remembered to do the practice, because I knew that wasn't true, but it took the practice to help me both feel that and at the same time feel more uplifted and supporting myself.
Not at all sure what I want to say, but just it's been a whirlwind tsunami couple of days in this particular system, and within that, one minute feeling like completely lost in and overwhelmed by just some really difficult stuff that I didn't know was there, or didn't expect it to come up in the way that it did. And then less than an hour later, feeling a much more like, and this has happened twice. It happened again today, just being sort of in this swirl of, oh my God, I kind of almost wish that I was dead, because this is awful. I don't know how to do this, and I don't see a way out. And then an hour later, just feeling the same tsunami of bliss as a client invited me into their world and let me feel, in one case energetically, and in another case just by letting tears flow, tears that they've been holding for probably longer than I've been alive. And just the incredible honor of being allowed to witness both of those things was as blissful in its own way as the other stuff was. Okay, if this is my time, then let's go. So yeah, and within the more difficult moments of that, like trying to practice seventh gesture for myself, and then losing track of whether I was practicing the seventh gesture or the 14th or the 21st. It was all just kind of there. It's a little bit, I mean, I don't quite quite know what to make of that. Just, I guess, more curiosity than anything. I mean, I have some kind of like, huh, how about that? Yeah.
I don't really know what to say either, except I do feel sad for some reason. And I think it's because this is sort of like the end of our practice in this uh, in this series. Gestures that is sad, and these last talks of yours, Nick, I mean, it's been that way for a while now. They've just been really profound, and it's really interesting to see how now we're talking about, our own personal experience of sensual, sexual parts of ourselves, that it makes so much sense that this could be such an important, part of our practice, that just makes sense. Well, yeah, that makes sense. This is so much a source of energy in my life. Of course, this should be included in um, and participate in the whole path itself. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about death and how this kind of all interrelates with the different bardos that we experience in life, and then the possible bardos that we would experience after we leave our body, and how, even going to sleep, and I'm sure in so many other ways, um, it happens every often in our daily lives as well. Um, that was interesting to hear you talk about that. I feel like I feel this often. There's a sense of ignorance, like there's a certain phase of the death process, or like in the dream state, where I'm just totally unaware, and it feels like I can't even form words or anything. And then, like you're saying, then there comes a point, maybe during the night, where I become lucid in a dream, and then I'm aware. And then that's like for me, that's a way of really seeing that that's a totally different feeling. And it just makes sense that now that you're showing us gateways, you're showing me a gateway to become more aware in my awakened state and practice that energetically. That makes sense, because I definitely can't use words or think very rationally, or maybe that's not even the right word, just can't think at all. But the energetic part of it is something I can relate to in that nonverbal way, maybe, to become more aware in those states of ignorance. Can I add something? I noticed today, I was looking at Janet. We were gazing in our practice, and at that experience of looking at, well, what's keeping me from that true perception of seeing Janet as Amitabha or the Buddha or her goodness, and that I just went back to that. That was such a useful, helpful gateway of somehow working with that. You know, what is it? You know, am I judging? Oh yes, I've seen that before. I've done that before, but that's not my practice now.
Mm. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that's very, it's beautiful. It's so wonderful to look and see. Um, oh wow, I'm not doing that anymore. It's very significant, right? Because especially when we by ourselves can recognize that progress, it's indelible, right? Do you know what I mean? It's like you're like, oh, I see in myself from my own experience, certainly that yes, this is not, or I see through this and I did this and I'm not doing that. Wow. It's really, really, well, it's one of those ways we build our faith born from experience, our confidence, you know, our certainty in what we're doing. Um, yeah. I also was really, I was touched by what you all shared. Like, ah, just it's so on my mind. It was really fascinating when you were talking about. I was like, wow, we are in sync, you know, because I was already thinking of some of these themes, at least the way it seemed to me. Maybe also I was listening with those ears, but I really, I feel my spiritual sort of grandfathers in Trungpa Rinpoche and A.H. Almas. You know, Almas is an interesting one because he influenced Adam Lobel a lot. Adam was interested in him and into him. And that's why we started bringing dyads really into Shambhala, because Almas does dyadic work. And of course, you know, that you could say comes out of the Sufi. He grew up in a Sufi culture and had some of that training. He also studied with Tartang Tuku and the Karmapa and Tibetan people, and he also studied with Shaivite Hindus, and so he did a lot of different traditions. And he, um, but but he basically, Shams and Rumi, the story goes, they spent 49 days in a dyad together without any words. And it's known that most of Rumi's poems are about Shams as his friend and teacher, but like that they sat there and they explored the universe in this very deep dyadic process. So anyway, unsurprisingly, to me, that someone like almost, or his real name is Hamid Ali, it's his pen name almost, but his friends call him Hamid, that he says. So that Hamid is, he's very much designed this whole process of inquiry, and a lot of the stuff like repeating questions and all that comes from him. And of course, Adam and I's connection is very strong, and he influenced me a lot with that kind of work, and then all the work I ended up doing with social meditation. So, it's interesting how this water trickles down the mountain, so to speak. And I was thinking of him because he talks about, all this plurality of realizations, and he has a very non-hierarchical idea about how reality manifests. He's like, yes, there are awakenings, yes, there are enlightenments, but what exactly, which ones? And there are many. And they're not, and they can be different, and they're all connected to true nature, but his point is that the true nature is unlimited in its ability to manifest. And it's interesting, the multifaceted jewel, this image came to me in our work, right, in these teachings very strongly. And it was just obvious to me that was needed as one of our symbols to describe the way we're working. Well, it turns out, his whole thing, he calls it the diamond approach, and he says one of the symbols is this, sometimes a diamond with facets is one of the ways that appears in his tradition. And again, it just fascinates me because I didn't know that, I never read that, I never saw that, and much later when I was reading him, I was like, oh wow, isn't that fascinating? Something's up, right? There's some and he's a very interesting figure to me, very, very sweet, powerful figure. And then of course Trungpa Rinpoche, and I appreciate Hamid because he speaks very directly about his own experience, and he's said that I do that on purpose at this time, because now is the time where people need that. They need teachers to talk about their experience directly, instead of where in the Tibetan tradition it's like he almost never said anything. Very few teachers did that. They just don't. Oh no. Maybe one-on-one and private thing, but they never. But he's really doing it. He's just saying, no, here's what I experience. Here's the many ways I experience, and it's very generous and very. I think it is very appropriate to the times. And I think Trungpa Rinpoche was more like that than many Tibetan teachers, and he did that a bit himself, right? He would share and say things about it. And also, I see this a little more in Trungpa Rinpoche, but he didn't talk about it. Maybe he did in the ways that he would say, don't be afraid of your own heart, don't be ashamed of who you are, be willing to taste your own heart, the genuine heart of sadness, sad joy, joining heaven and earth. Like all his teachings indicate this, but what I would call it is a freely experienced lucid passion. And I think that was a special realization of Trungpa Rinpoche. I don't think that a lot of Buddhist masters had that realization. Now, from Hamid's point of view, Hamid Ali's point of view, everyone is unique and has their own special piece of the true nature, or everyone is a special manifestation, has special gifts in some way, or matters. And I think this is also something Trungpa Rinpoche implicitly was always talking about, that to be able to be with yourself, love yourself, but also he would talk about appreciating who you were, and I think this is very different than the generic sort of Asian tradition of you're valuable because you have Buddha nature. Buddha nature is what matters. The individual,
You're just a aggregate composite thing that popped up and you'll disappear and who cares, right? At the same time, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's fair. I think that's a provisional way of talking to keep people from getting lost in things. When Hamid Ali talks about it, he says, yeah, I think people stay away from the uniqueness of people because it can be very confusing on the path. People could get caught up in it, but also it's very difficult to explain it. And I think Trungpa Rinpoche lived it and explained it implicitly, but anyway, I don't think that Hamid Ali has, this is just my opinions, right? My perspective, but I don't think he has that freely passionate, lucid passion. He has a kind of dispassionate involvement, is what he calls it. That he talks about this experience of being nobody, that things are just as they are. There's not someone experiencing them. He also says, of course, I am an individual experiencing that. So it's kind of a paradox. He makes that point a lot. But he talks about dispassionate involvement, that it's very free to be no one. When things are just as they are, you're just kind of free. You know, who cares? You're involved, you care, but you don't care so much. And I really believe he has achieved something like that. Just listening to him, the tone of his voice, his cadence, his energy. He's kind of like, you know, he has this, he does these beautiful rolling sounds in his voice. I love his voice. So it's very sweet and but very like everything's okay, you know. Whereas with Trungpa Rinpoche, it was like, I'm going to get angry and I'm going to be lucid and free in it. And then I'm going to come out the other side and I'm going to be sad and I'm going to get like I'm going to go through it all lucidly. But I don't think he would ever talk about it like that. But I know he was modeling to his students, it's okay to be human. It's okay to feel things. It's okay. And I think, again, going back to Hamid, sort of going back and forth with these figures that have been influential, he talks a lot about the inseparability of psychology and spirituality in his approach, that it's okay to understand how we feel. In fact, it's important on the spiritual path. Now, of course, one can get lost in that if you don't have any transcendent view, if you don't understand the nature and the selflessness that can emerge and all the profound experiences that can emerge, just the psychology doesn't liberate. But when you see them as inseparable, as he does in his approach, he talks about it that it's almost like you don't have to just let go of things and say, let it go. You can look and try to understand why something's there, because there's something about that that's important on the spiritual side too, from his point of view. And I think from Trungpa Rinpoche's point of view, we would call this genuineness. He was always talking about authentic presence and genuineness, right? That you can't, in his students, really his older students that I studied with, like Ruthie and, you know, Olive and Lisa and other, you know, and those kinds of people that had a lot of time with him, they didn't have the words explicitly other than that, but implicitly they were always transmitting that they were a unique and particular person that they had embraced, who was aware of their nature shining through or manifesting them. Now, Hamid Ali would say, true nature is manifesting as us. That the true nature of reality manifests as Lynn, it manifests as Stephen, it manifests as Janet, it manifests as Nick, and all at once. It does all of that. And it's not, we are, you know, yes, we have the same nature, but we are specific locations. We have specific perceptions, and that particularity, and our missions matter, and our particular qualities matter. So I feel very blessed to have these spiritual grandfathers that I just have come to mind a lot today, especially thinking about this unity of our relative health and well-being and our transcendent realization. It turns out there's a paradox of being an individual who's also this totality, but also the totality manifests as an individual, right? Do you see that wonderful flip around? And so it kind of comes full circle where I look at the work I'm doing with you, and it's like, our history, our life informs us. And then right now we get in touch with, and how am I practicing as who I am? And there is this kind of choiceless quality. We dive into that when we decide, okay, I'm willing to be what I am, work with what is. That what is includes the relative and absolute psychology together. And I think where people get really confused, because we've been raised in an individualist society where our particular qualities actually have been, it's like the whole of reality has warped into a new facet that wasn't so much in some of the ancient cultures. And there's this another way of true nature manifesting and seeing itself. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different. And so I really appreciate all of us, each of you sharing, all of us who share, we all shared about this unification, this joining of our relative, um, how we know ourselves and appreciate ourselves and learn from ourselves, and also how being a person is also, that is the clear light um, shining as you. So I really see that middle way, that the heaven and earth, the unity of these two truths. And it doesn't give us a lot of ground. Like, we can't go to the extreme of just focusing on the relative and mashing through historic, stories of what happened to us. Because if we do that without the view of the true natures doing that, there's no lucidity. We've eclipsed, right? And we know what happens then. We're recreating the trenches or the grooves of that karmic pattern. And that's fine. We can do that. But that doesn't lead us to the kind of freedom and bliss and compassion and wisdom that we want. On the other hand, we also can't just conveniently say, forget all that shit, it's just karma. Just say your prayers, supplicate the guru, and next life you'll be better, Like, that's not good enough for us either, which is, by the way, kind of a Tibetan approach to relative psychology for a lot of people in that culture. It's like, I have the personality I have, whatever. Just keep praying and doing the practices, and I'll just go to the ultimate. And it's like, well, that's interesting, because the ultimate is manifesting you. Now you, as the ultimate, are going back to your ultimate, but you're kind of ignoring this other side of yourself, which is already the ultimate. Why do you need to leave it? There's an error there, right? So that real unity is so rare. And the last thing I'll say about this is that the teachings are confusing about this. You know why? Because we learn particular practices that emphasize either a little more of the relative or a little more of the absolute at different points, even in our cycle, right? With the gestures, definitely, right? They alternate between relative and ultimate a lot. And the problem there is that when you can see how even when we're learning the teachings, there might be an emphasis on one side or the other. But luckily, that's why we have each other, and we have the dialogue, and we can actually talk about these things and share our experience and meet together and clarify all that. That doesn't mean, though, that that's not a pretty profound way to practice. And yeah, it just came to mind to me today, and it felt on the tip of my tongue. I was thinking of all of that, and what you all shared just felt so connected to it, and it's really interesting. I love how this happens, right? Where we get into a kind of a field of some kind of wisdom working through all of us, because we're sharing our true natures, and it's all coming through in our connection. We're like portals, one of the words that I love some of the, and both of them, both Trungpa Rinpoche and Hamid Ali, they both have ridiculously interesting vocabularies. But one of the couple of words that Hamid used for this is loci or foci. That each of us are a foci, a focus, or a loci, a location of the ultimate. So that's like a foci and loci, So like, if you look at it that way, it's like, whoa. And yet we're communicating and influencing each other, and connected and yet distinct at the same time. It's like a very beautiful paradox. Or maybe it's not even a paradox, but it's just not easily put into words. So just a little homage to that and to them and to us and to what we're doing. Threading the needle of ultimate and relative truth, not giving ourselves the ground of fixation or repression of those relative, not preferring either the ultimate or the relative, but seeing their unity, or at least working with that as our view, as our practice. So I thought maybe we could just take a little break, take like 7 minutes, just relax, take care of ourselves. And when we come back together, um, I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious what we'll do. I have some ideas. I'll present a little bit to you guys, and you can tell me what you want. I'll give you some options, but it'll be fun. Okay. See you in a few minutes. So the kind of, I don't know. It's a really interesting moment to come to the end of this cycle, and you mentioned it a little bit, Stephen. Just there's even some sadness. I think that's beautiful, beautiful. That is that ultimate and relative together, right? The genuineness of just, we find the true nature in everything that arises. Everything that arises is the expression of the true nature. And I think of the second gesture and the kind of poignancy, right? It's just like, every time I do the damn thing, it's like, oh. I like it. It's good that we have a full range of emotions, right? It would be terrible if we were stuck with just. I've told you the story about my figure Kenny, right? I think I told this story, maybe not to this group, but yeah, January. I had Kenny, and my friend Matt had Roger, and it was interesting because Matt's taller than me, and he had a doll that was like, it was like the doll for the $6 million man who was like this big, and my Kenny was actually a Bo figure from Bo and Luke, Dukes of Hazzard, but I put a Klingon outfit on him, so he looked really like spacey, and like, so we had our two characters, Kenny and Roger. Of course, people would be like, Kenny Rogers, and we'd be like, anyway, we didn't care, but we'd play our games, but the problem was my character, the character Bo from Dukes of Hazzard that I had, he had a permagrin on, this big smile, and I was like, and I would be in these very emotional situations with Roger, and I'd be like, and that was like, I forget who played him, but it was like, it wasn't Steve McQueen, but it was like some guy who was like, had a more serious face on the figure though, yeah. So it was more appropriate for many things. But I had my guffaw on all the time, and sometimes I'd be like, "This is driving me nuts." I remember I got pissed at it. And Matt now, he makes toys for a living, but he was always modding toys and fucking with them, obviously, and at the expense of me sometimes, but it was wonderful. And he's like, "I can fix that." And one of in one of his bolder moments. But he also, Matt, you gotta love this guy because he has such a mischievous sense of humor. Like, I think on the one hand, he's like, I think I can do it. And on the other hand, he's like, I just want to see what happens. Like, so there was both of that going on always with him. But he
Kind
just
of like
took a
somebody
lighter.
else we all know.
That's true. He took a lighter to Kenny's face and just started melting his face, and the rubber was like bubbling up. I was like, "This isn't good." And he's like, he started scraping it with like a, those like the popsicle wooden sticks. He's like smearing. He just ended up being like disfigured. So like what we did, which we could have done in the first place, but then he likes like, I got this, don't worry. And he put a ninja mask over his face, which I loved. And then it just added to the mystery. So now Kenny could actually interact in situations that weren't so cheerful. I don't know if there's a huge moral to the story other than it's a fun story, but the idea of like how it's so not helpful to have, to not be free in our emotions, right? To be restrained. And I was talking a little bit about that today, about freedom, right? And the idea of what is and Hamid Ali talks about these 4 kinds of freedom, and I think they just happen to correspond perfectly to the dignities, which is fascinating. But freedom from, which is the tiger level, we're free from suffering or free from, and it could even be on the outer level for well-being, right? We talk about the bliss of well-being, free from being incarcerated, free from being oppressed. It could be quite literal on the, it's, but obviously on the spiritual inner level, freedom from certain habitual patterns that have caught us, right? And the next level, freedom of, or you could say who is free, the freedom of the person, the way we are free as who we are. So again, it's more the compassion, the joy, the lion level, a little bit more belonging, as I would call it, right? As we go through the bliss level, I'm correlating these freedoms with that. And then the freedom to, which is like, I'm free to change my mind, or free to see different perspectives, or to hold multiple viewpoints, or that's sort of the surrender, free from the conventions or limitations, but then the freedom to integrate that into our action is a different level, right? That's sort of surrendering to the true nature more fully. And then finally, the dragon level is like just freedom itself, being one with freedom. Not even, you might not, that's, more technical languages, you're neither one nor many, neither same nor different. It's basically just showing you can't conceptualize it. But what is freedom? Just itself, pure freedom, unrestricted freedom. Of course,
That's like that moment of no thought at orgasm.
exactly.
Or sleep or sneeze.
That's right, Janet. That's what we're talking about, is that it's that kind of experience that in and of itself is free. Yeah, beautiful. So I thought those were cool. I thought those were neat. I think it's important to think about those, at the end of the line of all this. But then it also came to mind, like, I really just wanted to leave us some room to explore together and reflect, seeing as we haven't done a lot of that. That's one of the things I wanted to do. I did want to say just a tiny bit about emotions, and this deserves so much more of a teaching, and so I really want to come back to it and give it. I don't want to do that tonight because I know that that's a powerful and important teaching that I really want to be able to explore with you all. But I think I've thought about these the teachings of these 21 gestures as, I've talked about as a spiral, right? We keep going deeper. And I think the next time we go around, there are things that can come out that couldn't come out before. And that really suits my teaching style, and also my personal preferences, that's how I learn, and that's how things, you can build on that foundation and then go deeper each time. So if I were present, I wouldn't present this the first time around generally, but because of my intimacy with you all, I thought I'd at least mention it because I alluded to it last week a little bit. And it just seems so on point with what we're exploring, this unity of ultimate and relative that each of us were essentially talking about when we checked in, this kind of including our personal story and our personal journey and our personal uniqueness with our the universal aspect or the transcendent aspect of our awareness and nature, just how those two are inseparable in a very beautiful, almost unfathomable way. So you can see why many teachers and traditions would just avoid that altogether. It's just too hard to talk about. It's too hard. I can get you to the ultimate, then you're on your own. Hopefully you can figure it out, But that's not real. I think we're trying for maybe a higher bar with that. Trying. I think we're doing that. And here's a central teaching for that. Ironically, and again, we'll come back to it in more detail, but I just wanted to touch it, which is it became clear to me over the years doing this kind of practice of bliss practice and then identifying these centers and this, could it go down? Yes, it can. In fact, there are some where it does. There's like ones where it goes up, where it goes. There's nothing. It's such a difficult thing to talk about, but if reality is what we are, then we're creating reality with how we perceive what we are. And because we're unlimited, we can create all very real different ways of being real. I don't know how to say it any more simply, and I don't want to get into philosophical language, but that's just as best I could do on the fly here. But so there are many truths depending on what you collapse from the ultimate unlimited true nature. There are many ways that the true nature can appear and be true, not just a relative. It's not just relativism, right? It's not, it's just relative. No, it's still an absolute truth, but it's manifesting based on a collaboration between the perceiver and the nature kind of having a particular facet. Another person could look at things differently, and that could also be true for them. And there isn't actually a contradiction because at the level of the true nature, it's beyond conceptual contradictions. It's not binary. So I've tried to talk about this sometimes as both and thinking. And I've used the multifaceted jewel to express, I don't have it right now, but that idea that the different facets are all true and they're all different and they all are related. No problem, right? It's just a bigger way of perceiving than the binary mind of concepts. Anyway, in this system and with the work I've done with it, what started to dawn on me is that emotions, and this actually I think originally came through to me through social meditation and in that arena. And I would observe people in the circles, in all different cultures around the world, begin to, first there's the bright space of shared awareness that is spacious and bright and you can feel it, and it's a very powerful, it's true, our true natures are kind of collaborating to make this field of warriorship, this field of power. It's that is a very, very real thing. And it's very helpful, and it creates incredible safety and co-regulation at a level that's very different than a binary kind of two people relating, right? Which is wonderful. But when you have a big field, it starts to get very powerful, very tribal. There's something about the diversity of psychologies and energies that can accommodate vast amounts of energy. Doesn't collapse into me and you and that whole psychodynamic and parental history and all that stuff that could get locked up in that. The transference has no one target when it's that big, so everything gets very weird, right? It gets very bright and very fluid. And what tends to happen is people begin to, not always, but this is one of these experiences that really hit me again and again, which is people begin to feel safe enough to bring up a traumatic emotional experience that they have not felt safe enough, or that they felt ashamed of sharing or being witnessed in, that it wasn't safe to bring it up one-on-one or in a group. And suddenly they're in a group and they're slowly feeling like, holy shit, this is a space where I finally feel like I could actually say this and I won't be excommunicated. I won't be destroyed. They're not totally sure, but they have enough energy in it that they start to share and they start letting the cat out of the bag. Now, perhaps from a conventional psychological point of view, you say, ooh, that's dangerous. These people could re-traumatize themselves, right? This, like, they're bringing up their story, they're getting really... But what I saw happen, and this is fascinating, because no one intervened, it was safe. Fascinating, right? A complete judo flip to the normal conventions, right? Like, oh, you should interrupt. Well, not if everyone is in presence and in the bright space of awareness, non-conceptually, at best they can, but holding that field. What would happen is the person would reach this apex of and even vocalize like ideations as I want to kill myself, or like the most scary shit, right? All the way up to that. And then they would pop through the other side. And they would see the non-reaction. The reaction was very not a non-reaction. It was a spacious, unconditional awareness, presence, and safety. And then they would keep pinging like, and then so they'd say the thing that would normally get people to go, you need help, or I don't want you to talk like, or whatever thing, and they would get sucked back into the traumatic cycle, right? It would just be like, that's not okay. But instead, the social group is doing something that's never happened in a social group. They're meditating in presence socially, right? Which is a mind-blowing thing in terms of transformative power, right? And what would happen is the person would go up to the apex, the peak of that traumatic expression, and then they'd look around, they'd feel themselves, they go, but actually, I feel so much better having said that. Or some version of that, right? I saw this happen so many times that I started to go, oh, wow. And I tried to get people to study it, and all of a sudden, all these people say, oh, yeah, I'm going to do my doctorate thing. And all these people would almost do it. It never happened. We wanted to do studies of social media, but somebody maybe someday will do some version similar, I don't know, whatever. But it was fascinating. But what I learned, though, by that, what's so interesting, and why I brought it up, the emotional process is orgasmic, or the orgasmic process and the full emotional healing process are identical, I think, in pattern. Maybe not identical, but they follow the same fractal pattern. Base state, stimulus, arousal, surrender or overload, and then non-conceptual blackout or orgasmic or lucidity, if in the group held them in awareness so they didn't black out or go into story, and therefore the emotion finally got to complete its mission, come up in its full measure, be felt in its full measure, be witnessed in its full measure, dissolve in its full measure because it completed its mission. And I don't know, the language I'm using is the language I'm using. I'm sure other people would describe it in other beautiful ways that are just as appropriate or maybe more precise, but I'm not trying to be the best at anything right here. I'm just, but I'm just trying to say, I see that this is a real thing, and it hit me, oh my God, the stages of orgasm that I talk about with the centers and tantric practice. All emotions want to have their orgasm and to create a new life, and or to create or to die, to complete their mission, and then something new can be born. Like it's a crazy thing, but I think it's not at all, right? I think it's actually very sane, which is that if emotions don't get fully felt, they remain in the channels, they go back down into the alive vijnana, they come back up when triggered in proximity, and and they don't complete. Their mission is undone. Now, it's very interesting to say purely affect and lucidity in witnessing, allowing that to go to its full measure in lucidity, the message is received, the person is unrepressed, and some kind of other sideness of the orgasmic process occurs. But it doesn't occur without lucidity, right? So this is the key thing, and the same is true with bliss practice. So, and I'll just say this and then I'll stop here, but this is the last thing I'll say about it. But I have identified these 4 stages of working with an emotion that map to the bliss practice that we're doing. And I believe the template of bliss practice and tantric sexual practice is actually a wonderful vehicle for training people to practice this kind of full liberation of emotion and karmic, traumatic history, whatever. So the way that it goes is the tiger level is to turn towards the emotion in a non-judgmental way. This is something that John Wellwood talks about, right? You turn towards it and you just don't judge it. That's a hard thing to do, but that's the tiger level of working with emotion. And that's the kind of process that's being modeled in social meditation. People would sit there, they're just being with someone's emotion or their own, and they're trying to let go of their thoughts about it. They're practicing non-judgment. They're like, no, I'm just going to be here. I'm going to be. And I'm, wow, how do they say that? Let it go. Just be there for them. You see how that is? And so you're literally having people model to you what you need to do inside to meet the emotion. Second stage, if and only if you can do that, right? Safety has to be established. You've got to feel safe, just like well-being, right? The safety of the root chakra, the belly chakra, right? The survival. You have to feel like you're regulated, co-regulated, whatever. You don't go forward if you can't do that. It won't work, right? Now, you can have sex without safety, and you can keep going with emotions without safety, but it creates all sorts of karmic challenges, right? So it's, Snow lion, open one's heart to the emotion. Let the into your heart. Let it. Now that's a step further than non-judgmental, right? You've turned towards it, which was incredibly brave, but now you're actually letting the emotion tickle your heart or come into your heart, or you're opening your compassion to yourself, feeling that feeling. So that's a very powerful thing. That's the relational sense of belonging we talk about in the second level of bliss practice in the chakras, right? That kind of, only if that's present, moving on to surrendering to the emotion. Ooh, that's terrifying. There's an ego death, right? Normally we want to protect ourselves from some sort of strong emotion that is threatening our sanity. But if we have non-judgmentality, open-heartedness, enough safety, and the arousal reaches a surrender. And here there's just another way of saying that is total acceptance, right? The complete acceptance of what we're feeling. If you flip it that way, it's not like a violation of us that we're asking for. We're talking about it as a profound, but it is an ego death in a sense, right? Or if we're clinging to a scheme of control, to accept something is like, what are you talking about? I don't want to do that, right? But so that's a fascinating moment. Now, the fourth and final stage of liberating the trauma emotion or the karmic emotion that needs to be, it's a messenger that needs to fulfill its destiny and have its orgasm, is to become one with the emotion. And this is the dragon level, where we literally view ourselves from within and as the emotion. This is such a profound experience that the first time I did it, I would hear Trungpa Rinpoche say, oh, well, you can become one with the emotion. And then he would just move on and be like, well, so back up. How do you do that? He never said. I mean, maybe he told some students somewhere, I've seen nothing of it. I know he said that. He's very clearly said that. And I thought it was brilliant, but no instructions, right? Here are the instructions, or a set of instructions. So once you've gone through these stages, finally, and what I've experienced when I become one with the emotion, very similar to an orgasmic you're like, I am anger. And when you are anger, you're like, and then there's this kind of like, you're lucid, it's a field, it's vibrational, it's alive, it has its own wisdom. There's no story left. You are your object and the subject. It's this weird thing where the wisdom really dawns. Whatever emotion was in you that needed to be felt, suddenly you know why it was there and it is a deity. You become the deity of that emotion. And then often, that disperses into a feeling of release, relief, other side of itness. um, so I share that because obviously that would be a fun thing to do in a lot of detail together, and I would want to do that with you. But I didn't want to not bring it up and share it, because I think the implications of practicing bliss practice, in my experience, there's a real correlation. If you can move the sexual energy into the central channel, what do you think's happening when you have a super strong emotion? If you can move that energy into the central channel, that's what dakinis do. When we talk about the dakinis that could feel very strong emotions come flying through them, and then they're like lightning, they're done, they're on the other side. It's completely free, like free emotions that are unrestricted, unrepressed, unfixated. Therefore, their wisdom and their manifestation are simultaneous, you could say. Well, that's an ideal, but these practices lead to that, the channels actually being able to do that, right? The freedom to suck. Yeah.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
What is the difference between having orgasm expressed with the body in a normal fashion and orgasm expressed holding it and turning it inward? And is there a difference?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think one difference is the duration. When we move the energies up and then spread, but in, you could say, and up, the duration is longer. Another difference is you can then recycle that energy back around and do it again, and then even longer duration of resting. So you can have multiple orgasms. Whereas some people have a harder time with that, physically, whether at least men often have a hard time. Some women have a hard time.
I mean, when you're relating it to an emotion,
yeah,
feeling itself, expressing itself, and then is there two types of expression then of an orgasm? There's one orgasm where it's sort of you're not conscious, you're not aware, it's just it's like a knee-jerk reaction, and then the other is you become one with the emotion, and that is a form of orgasm.
Yes, that's right. So like with sneezing, have you ever been driving and you sneeze? There's a funny moment where you have to let go. It's scary because you can't think for a moment. You can't actually move. I've been like, you don't know that you would be able to move the wheel even for that one, and it's a very short amount of time. Really, it's fine. People probably don't have many accidents from sneezing, but that's an example of, it's purely physiologically, the energy's moving the central channel. The wind's thoughts can't produce, and that can happen, and you cannot appreciate it, right? We always say, meditators, what's the difference between us and everyone else? We appreciate when we're present. Other people are present many times. They happen to be present. They just don't care, or they don't know how to care, or they don't, they have other priorities. So when you appreciate an orgasm, that's already different than an ordinary orgasm.
Mm.
A conventional orgasm, it just happens. You kind of know it's happening. You kind of there for it. On degrees, depends on the day, depends on your state of psychology. You still have a stoppage of thought, and you still have bliss. But when you bring the lucidity in and move the energy up, you increase the duration. You can cycle that energy. You can use it for various things. Um, in that way, it's beginning to harness that energy. And it's almost like if somebody was like, they had a lighter or like a match, right? And they could light it and it would go for a little while and then the flame goes out. And then there's another person who has one of those torches that's like got some fuel on it. And it's like, you burn your match and then you look at the person with the torch and you're like, I want one of those. It's kind of like that.
When you can see a color that is so luminous, so bright, and there's a joyful feeling, is that an orgasm with that color? And does that mean a normal way of seeing a color is just not really even noticing it? It sort of just fades in the background, but that's also a type of orgasm?
Oh, you're going to have to help me here with this one. So the color is happening inside of you in your experience during the orgasm. It's very bright.
Well, I was actually thinking of seeing such a beautiful color creates an
like
orgasm.
while you're making love or while you're having an orgasm and you see a color and your senses.
No. The color itself, not even having sex, but the color itself creates an orgasmic feeling because it's such a beautiful, when Trampalo is talking about, so when you see the color blue, it is magnificent. It's like, it's not just seeing the color blue, it's actually becoming alive or something, or like an orgasm.
Yes. That's right. That's beautiful. It is that deep appreciation and then becoming, and I use this language, become one with. I'm not being philosophical. I could be much more precise with my words. I'm just saying experientially, we feel one with that color or that thing, and it feels so good. Even with the flower, right? Same thing. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's different, slightly different physiological processes, but I wouldn't say that you can't get aroused looking at a color. You can. You absolutely can. And in fact, that micro orgasm, we talk about that little secret center, just sort of, you might be surprised that sometimes when you think you're just appreciating something, that's actually going on. And that shows the spectrum of feeling that it's whatever we call sexual and not sexual bullshit. Those are all labels. We're afraid of the spectrum because it's so vast and beautiful and the whole system is so elegant. But we try to compartmentalize things and say, this is this and that's that. What if there aren't such hard lines? But you have to look at your own experience to see, what is the difference between arousal and appreciation. And this is a good thing to do a monologue practice with yourself or a dyad with a friend. If we had more time, we could do something like that, right? You can record yourself saying, what is the difference? You could talk about it for 10 minutes. What is the difference between appreciation and arousal? You'll find many differences and many similarities, probably. It might be very interesting.
I guess my question kind of was like, there's two ways of having an orgasm: physically, expression, exploding that way, and then appreciating. When we're like seeing the blessings, or a color, a beautiful color, is there also a way of having an orgasmic reaction to it in a appreciative way? But is there also another type of orgasm that it might occur that is just sort of the more a different way of having orgasm, because it's kind of feeling like there is two different types of orgasms, in the traditional sense,
Yeah.
and then in this spiritual sense you're talking about. Is it the same way? Like if you feel, for a human being that sees a beautiful sunset,
Yeah. Hmm.
is there different levels of appreciation, or is it maybe
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think you know this. I think that's why you're bringing it up, because I think you've experienced this and you're kind of curious about it. And I would encourage you to keep going in that direction, looking at it, playing with it, because um, one of the things that's crazy about Mahasukha, or great bliss, is that it's just our true nature recognizing itself. And that's said to be the sort of primordial orgasm, or the unending orgasm. And one could feel that at any moment. The bliss is always in the background as basic energy of awareness.
That's right.
So there, you know, yeah, some people talk about the sexual yogas and say, yeah, the point of karma mudra is to get to the point where you don't even have desire anymore and everything's an orgasm all the time and you don't even have sex. And I'm like, I just have to roll my eyes at that shit. I'm like, that's one possible way of creating a reality, but that's not the only outcome of this stuff. I'm sorry, nothing's like that. And that's what I want you to feel empowered in, Stephen, is there's a certain level of freedom that you actually can gain abilities that are based on your particular wiring. So you have to trust yourself and try things. And yes, what you're saying is true. It's really, really true. And keep looking at it, keep playing with it. And we'll keep talking about it.
Can't say one more thing.
Okay.
I know I'm hogging up a lot of time, but
No, it's okay. It's fine.
we were talking about Chevy Chase walking around the sacred mountain.
That's right. I remember you bringing that up.
And then we were talking about, maybe somebody in your state of being walking around the sacred mountain. And you said it's not, one's not better than the other. So is Chevy Chase having his own orgasmic reaction to what he's doing? And you're having a different type of orgasm.
Well, let's look at it this way. The true nature manifests Chevy Chase, and the true nature manifests anyone who's going around and is more aware of that or not, myself or someone, a practitioner. But the thing is what does the individual experience? When you're looking at Chevy Chase, it's back to being about Stephen. Because you're not really evaluating Chevy. You might have projections about, oh, this fucking guy, look how he's pretending to be this obnoxious American. But then you could be like, wait, is he lucid? Is he not lucid? Like, is he enjoying himself? Is this his form of play? Is this sacred dance to him? Or is he just fucking off? Like, and then you're back in your own loci or a foci, right? And you're like, wait, I'm Stephen evaluating. And so, the question is like, what's Stephen doing looking at Nick and Chevy? And then it's like, oh shit, am I seeing the sacred mountain?
I'm so busy judging.
If one is judging the other, the joke is that's your experience of the mountain. It may or may not be theirs, right? And I think I'm more likely to know what someone else's experience is like when I'm completely open and without judgment. But when I already have some kind of like evaluation going on, or I'm looking to evaluate, I've already created a certain reality. That doesn't mean that Chevy's not being an idiot. Doesn't mean he's not a Buddha. It doesn't mean either, right? It just means like, ooh, what am I doing?
That's pretty profound for me.
Yeah, that's right.
That was good, Nicholas. Thank you.
Yeah.
And what you just said goes right back to what you were saying, what you were describing, and I've experienced is possible in a social meditation circle when there's just this open field of non-judgmental presence, and something needs to bubble up, and it's just held in the field. Um, Such a profound experience. And I love how you do a parallel between that and the 4 stages of orgasm, which it strikes me isn't that different. And again, nature, when, for example, when a lion grabs a gazelle by the neck and takes it down, and the gazelle manages to get away and runs and shakes it off and then goes on its way, it's really not that different. It's that following something to its completion in a way that's not being interfered with.
Right. Like the
So
knot
there's the
being
lucidity
frozen.
throughout, and so it doesn't get frozen.
Right. The energy can flow. It doesn't get caught in a karmic knot, and the winds can flow through the channels. And then there's like a whole different relationship to the event. Um, yeah. Yeah.
So whether it unfolds in the wild or in the social meditation circle or in the bedroom, it's nature, right?
The true nature expresses itself, and we have nature as this unspoiled, we use that word a lot with nature, right?
Most beautiful temple and skillful teacher.
Environment, exactly, that, yeah, it does that modeling for us. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a great example. Thank you. Lynn, did you have something you wanted to share?
No, just appreciation, Nick. Just deep appreciation. And for everyone here too.
Mm. Mm. That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is so interesting. I feel like, if you look at the meeting of hearts and minds, the meeting of true natures through two loci, through two people, um, which we often call relationships, but it could happen at many scales, the brief and slightly, um, what's the right word? The fresh, two people meeting at a dyad in some program or something, and then there's the more deeply entwined or intimate connection of a relationship or friendship, family, couples. but you could see it this way too, which is, you know, the first stage of do the two people, can they be turned towards and really see each other in a non-judgmental way, right? That's a hard thing to do sometimes, right? We have our own reasons not to want to turn towards someone as they are, not as we would like them to be, or even as I often fall for, as I see they can be, or the aspects of them that are present, even that I'd like to connect with more. I'd like to evoke, even, right? So that's a tricky one. But you know, any version of that, just actually turning towards another and being like, can I just see you without judgment, without agenda? And then from that, can I open my heart to you as you are? That's more than just being non-judgmental, right? That's like, now I'm going to actually love the whole person, or at least love the person as they are. Try to connect with loving them without any, and then to fully accept them, to fully surrender any desire to change them or anything, or to give up any, even more fully, but staying connected. And then the sense of becoming one, the meeting of minds, that moment of, we're still two, you know, the cool thing about that is you don't disappear, you don't get erased, you don't lose your individuality. You know, you just have an experience of being two individuals that realize they're also one in that moment, and they're like, now that can be terrifying for people and groundless, and I, you know, but it can also be one of the most beautiful experiences, spiritually, romantically, whatever, love-based experiences. And sometimes it's in love and in family, we don't even think of it as a spiritual experience, but it is. But if it's not recognized, then it's not as powerful, right? It's so interesting. I had the fortune with my father of being able to, just the sheer volume of love coming at me, I could recognize it as a spiritual experience. And it's indelible. As they say, it's a special kind of memory. When you have tantric sex with someone and you're both bring your natures and lucidity together, it's said that just one moment of the meeting of your minds, you'll never forget it. And every time you remember it, it's called a special memory in Buddhism. It's tantric Buddhism, which means it's not a conventional memory where it's like a concept. It's actually the experience re-dawns. So you actually technically only need to have that experience once. But I think, man, what a that would be paltry. But then again, if every time you remember it, you can experience it, it's like, it's not so bad. It's a pretty good thing. But
Nick, would that be in a like a description of that? Would be like when Trungpa brought the Sakyong, called him into the sunroom and just sat with him and held his hand or something like that. They just were, there was no.
That's exactly what it was. I remember the Sakyong saying when Trungpa Rinpoche was dying, and he just called him in his room, and he just gazed, and he just, you know, grabbed his hands and just gazed into his eyes for, geez, it must have been, I don't know if it's hours, but it was a long time. And the Sakyong just had this feeling that he was getting this massive transmission, non-conceptually, wisdom things, you know, meeting of minds fully, right? I remember that with Ruthie falling asleep, seeing her, gazing her perfectly, her face, beautiful eyes, was just looking, and my eyes were closed, falling asleep, but she was like vivid, and I was just looking in her eyes, and it seemed like I was doing it for a really long time. And yeah, I think, yes. Yeah, like that, Stephen. Exactly that. And that's why the transmission, the meeting of minds and the transmission is, they always say, oh, you know, there are ceremonies, but the actual thing, it just happens in a very intimate, real way. And I also found that it happened a lot in dyads, just between strangers. And that's what blew my mind about that form of meditation, is it was like, holy shit, people are meeting minds And we would talk about it in groups of social meditation. We would talk about how it was happening all the time. And it was like, of course, it's really special when that person and you have a very special connection, but it's also neat with someone you don't even know. It becomes a special connection. It's like, wow, that was neat. But when you really have that connection, I think it actually taps into a deeper integration of ultimate and relative, because when you just meet someone you don't know, there's like you kind of get it. It is all there, but it's not as, it's like when you take along your whole self and someone really knows you and you can do that. I think it's neat, but they're all neat. They're all good. Just different flavors of ice cream. It's all ice cream.
Nick, were you kind of saying that if I look at somebody as the Buddha,
Hmm.
that maybe that in itself is kind of a projection in a way that I'm not really seeing them, for themselves and being and just loving them for whoever they are, instead of trying to say, well, I see you as a deity. Is there some sort of
Right.
kind of still barrier there or something when I do that?
Ooh, what a beautiful question, Stephen. I think there's, so here's how it goes. When we imagine another as a deity, it's a special form of perception called pure perception, because even though we might be projecting that on them initially, the joke is it's actually kind of true, right? It is true. So what it does is it helps us to start to see, wait a second, first I was just projecting Amitabha, now I'm feeling a Buddha looking back at me. What the hell? So that's the point, is that there's an evolution. Eventually, is it also possible just to look at someone and say, you are the Buddha, and I can see it and see it? Yes. You don't need to imagine them as a Buddha. Uh, it's also possible to do it that way. But the joke is both work. And once you get to that experience, you can drop whatever boat got you across. You know what I mean? Like you do, they say you go the boat to the other shore, you don't carry it around. So you don't need, once you see someone's Buddha nature, you don't need to keep projecting another Buddha on them. There's already a Buddha looking at you. But if you're to look at someone and go, I don't know if they're the Buddha, look at them, project the Buddha on them, and then go, oh, now I see it. Then you can turn off your flashlight because there's a light out. It's full moon now. You see what I mean? Why would you have a flashlight on when you can see? But if you don't have a flashlight and it's dark, put on the flashlight. Don't bump into anything. It's a real light too. That light, that flash is a real light. That's the crazy thing about pure perception. When you project that, you're actually projecting your nature onto them, and then their nature really shines back like a conduit, like back through that light that you're projecting, and then you go, wait, it is real. So it's fine. It's beautiful. But yeah, you can also do it either way. You can do both. Wow. I was saying to Janet earlier today, like, as you all know, I'm trying to procure a new housing situation and my own sort of seat, in that, and having my own place. And I think um, it made me aware that when you kind of feel like you're in someone else's space, as I have at times here, as much as just so awesome and love my friend and all that, but uh, the the ability to sort of do certain things, like I had hoped that we might be able to do certain, little more practice together, a retreat, maybe a day long or something, like things like that that we could just enrich a little more. So I just wanted to say, I hope next time I can offer a little more of that. I think I felt like, oh wow, it was hard to just never quite seem to work out in this environment or space. But yeah, I appreciate you all so much and us so much, and I'm just so excited, and going forward, I my thought, I'm thinking on the fly here a little bit, but I was thinking maybe we'd give ourselves a break until the new year, but not, we'll start the next cohort teachings in May, just like we did last time. But from the new year till then, I thought we could meet on Tuesdays nights, and if people want, when you want, and do practice together and discussion about the gestures, and just sort of have it be a Sangha check-in point, even if I'm not distributing, regularly updated teachings and all that. But I thought that would be kind of fun. So again, optional thing, but I don't want it to go too long. And even in between that time, we can get together if people want. Maybe it can be kind of like open and relax, and it's open after that. But I'm just saying, like, I know the holidays are coming, and maybe it's good to have a little break. But I wanted to offer that if that would be um, helpful or enjoy. Yeah, okay, good. So that'll be fun, and yeah, just practicing and discussing, and it'll be, because I even feel like tonight, like, oh wow, we had such a great time together, and I don't know how much that time went so fast, and I feel like we didn't even get to talk that much, but we did. We got some good stuff in. I guess I felt like I couldn't not talk about the emotional pattern of wisdom in relationship, because it just feels like an auspicious moment to make that connection. But anyway, any last thoughts before we close, or anything you want to share?
You still planning for us to meet together with you and later in the summer?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am so excited for that. I mean, that is this next year, we're going to do our first annual retreat, I hope. So, yeah, I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be so magical. And I mean, personally, I love all of you so much, and I love our work. I personally love this, that we have this, like, just want to say I love our Zoom video connection, and I mean, it's how we all met, and it works, and it's great. That said, there's just nothing like the power and presence and intimacy of being in the same space together physically and in the same environment. And so yeah, that is an exciting, uh, very exciting thing. So let's talk more about that in the new year, about like when that might work for everyone, and we'll make it happen. Regardless of my situation, wherever I am, we'll make it happen. I promise that. Whichever location. Hmm. I love surprise, tenderness. I already feel tender with you guys all the time, but then I don't know. It's like, okay, wow, it's our last thing tonight. Wow, just sort of. Then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, that has some power and feeling to it. Um, I Yeah, I'm so grateful to you all. I think I know that I say that and I mean that, and you hear that. And it's an extraordinary privilege to know you and work with you this way, and to be so close to you and love you so much. And the way we all show up, it's like it really is my ideal sangha and sense of sangha that in some ways never really had until you. I mean, I had large groups of people and think there were good things about it, but this is so intimate and beautiful and powerful that kind of makes its own wonderful. This is a wonderful part of my life to be able to share this with you and your life. So I treasure where we are. I'm actually really grateful for it.
And we do still have Wednesday night.
Yes. A maho. All right. Let us dedicate the merit. We'll sing the song and good. All you sentient beings, I have a good or bad connection with. As soon as you have left this confused dimension, may you be born in the Western Sukhavati. And once you're